Hello and welcome to Levels Plus Whenever episode 173, and we've got a whole slew of Resident Evil to talk about today. Characters, game rankings, spoilers. This video's got it all. Yes, there will be spoilers for Resident Evil Requiem in this particular video, unlike last time where I tried to keep that to a relative minimum. I also got a new webcam. Yay! It's supposedly 4K, so it looks a lot better. I'm very excited about that. So let's do some pickups, because I've gotten some things since I recorded the last episode and set it to publish way ahead of when I actually put it together. I got a new shirt from the Yeti, which is this really nice Rosalina shirt. Can't really see the skin tone really well in this light because the camera is reflecting the blue, but I love that shirt. I also got Tomodachi Life Living the Dream. Been goofing around with that. Got 7 of the this webcomic characters in there. Got so many more to do. Marvel Cosmic Invasion finally came out on physical. And perhaps most exciting for me is this delightful hardcover of my own work. This is Isolated Volume 1 and 2 Omnibus, which I talked about a couple weeks ago. Finally got it in the mail. This is really, really nice. This certainly lived up to my expectations in terms of print quality. The artwork inside looks fantastic. Really, really happy with how that turned out, and that's basically going to be getting a lot of review time as I am wrapping up Volume 3. I'm in the revision process for that right now, and having a wonderful time getting that book to the finish line, hopefully by June, July. We'll see. I got to get time for people to read it so I can get some feedback. Okay, with all of that preamble out of the way, and this new webcam is holding up great. Yay! I'm going to go ahead and switch us on over to the character ranking for Resident Evil. Pretty excited about this, honestly. I've been thinking a lot about Resident Evil since replaying playing 1 for the first time, replaying 2 Classic, 3 Classic, and then beating Requiem twice. I've got opinions on Resident Evil, so this will be very fun and exciting, and I hope that you enjoy my potential rants about a few of these characters as we get to them. This tier maker was made by Big Hefty, so thank you. And I'm going to try to basically distill my opinions on characters as a combination of classic and remake versions, which can be tricky because we've got some very different takes on a few of these characters. I'm looking at Ashley. Ashley in classic RE4 is a very different character than Ashley in Resident Evil 4 Remake. But I don't have 2 separate Ashleys to put up here. I've only got the one, so we're gonna consolidate as best as possible and try to find the better version to rank. But I will talk about both versions if that is a necessary requirement. So let's start with my least favorite mainline character in the Resident Evil franchise. It's Chris Redfield! He's going into F. I have not liked Chris since basically the beginning. The only game I could remotely say that I like him in is Resident Evil Code Veronica, which is quite a statement to make, because that's probably, in most people's minds, the weakest game he's in. But I didn't like his character in Resident Evil 5 all that much. It got worse in 6. He completely changed his entire visual aesthetic in 7 for no explainable reason. 8, he's a dumbass. doesn't tell Ethan anything. Therefore, creating a plot because of negligence and omission. And he's just, from the very first original game, it's just like cocky white guy, generic ass protag. And I'm not into that aesthetic really at all. So he has done nothing to redeem himself in the years since. So he's going to sit right there. Jill Valentine. I'm going to put her in A because I have a very strong bias for the 2 protags that are going to get that coveted A++ rank. And Jill, as much as I've enjoyed her in 1 remake, 3 and 3 remake, and Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and to even a lesser extent, Marvel vs. Capcom 3. I feel like she has been sidelined in some weird ways. She's even in Revelations, and I don't even remember her. And I played as her because that's who you start with. I feel like Jill just hasn't had the opportunity to grow and develop as a character the same way that Leon and Claire have. So that's why she's an A. I think that her 3 remake voice actress and her whole vibe in that game is excellent. And I want to see her come back in another game with that whole aesthetic and the same voice actress because she killed it. She's the best part of 3 remake. And I want to see her in something else. I got to be honest, I think Wesker's a great villain. I really do. It's annoying, but he's really good. Especially once he started getting all of his virus powers starting in Code Veronica. And he's the highlight of 5, in my opinion. Even with the really crappy voice actor that has abuse stuff about him. I think Wesker's a phenomenal character. His motivations are clear, they're strong. He's just got the camp that's necessary to work as a Resident Evil villain, in my opinion. He's really, really excellent, and it's a shame he's dead. I am glad that we're getting a chance to revisit him with the remakes. RE4 Remake Wesker is great, and I was super pumped about him. We'll talk about another similar character momentarily, but I think that Wesker is fantastic, and he was a great add to Marvel vs. Capcom 3 too. Just a really great character all the way around, and I cannot help but be a big fan of this silly man. Barry's a B because he hasn't really been in a lot. He's pretty good in both the RE1 games as a support character. He's an intriguing character. He was fun in RE5 Mercenaries mode. I never played Revelations 2. And that's pretty much where we can say Barry's had an impact on the series, outside of RE3 Classic being the helicopter pilot. I think he's a perfectly fine supporting character that probably deserves to be in another game at some point, but not a fave. Rebecca has unfortunately got a problem, and that problem is Resident Evil 0. A game I've never played, and I don't want to play. And since she's with Chris's campaign, I don't really think I've ever come across her because I've only played Jill in RE1. I think she's fun in RE5 and Mercenaries mode, but she's not made an appearance in the series outside of that and Mercenaries 3D, I believe. So I don't have a whole lot of an opinion about her, honestly. Billy is also in the C rank because I never played as him. I've only seen brief snippets of gameplay of Resident Evil 0, and that's the only game he's ever been in. I don't think he's a terrible character, but I don't have any opinion really, so I'm just going to put him in the C tier. Let's just go ahead and resolve the Resident Evil 2 question. the three greatest characters of Resident Evil right there, Leon, Claire, and Ada. I love all three of them. Leon has gone through such a spectacular journey from being an RE2 classic, being great there, RE4 being such the important game that it is. Shame about RE6 though. Matt Mercer tried, but the writing did him no favors. And then with Resident Evil 2 Remake, Resident Evil 4 Remake, and Resident Evil Requiem, Nick has done probably the most consistent and splendid character development on a single Resident Evil character in the entire franchise as a single actor. Love him. He is Leon to me at this point. All the past Leons, as good as they mostly were, pale in comparison to Nick's performance. I think he is just the best thing to happen to Resident Evil. I love him, and Leon is my favorite Resident Evil character. Claire is really close, though. I love Claire. I've loved Claire since RE2. I thought that she was just a sick design, so unique and distinct. Ran with like this bike college angle that I think just really worked for her. And I think that the RE2 remake design is solid, but there's still something iconic about RE2 classic Claire that has not been replicated, although I do like her Code Veronica outfit a lot as well. She has been unfairly sidelined for too many games. She is in 2. She's in Code Veronica. She's in Revelations 2. And 2 Remake. And Mercenaries 3D. And that's it. And she needs to be in more games. I'm really hoping that Code Veronica Remake is a real thing, because I want more Claire in my life, especially with this new voice actress. She's phenomenal. I want to see her doing badass things in Code Veronica. Carlos, I think, is a B. I think that he is greatly improved in 3 Remake, so that is the version that I am nominating for a B. I would probably put classic Carlos in C tier at best, and possibly F, because he's a bit more of a perv in that game, hitting on Jill a lot more often. I think that the dynamic that the voice actor had is much better with Remake. Still a little flirty, but it's better. It's really funny that the voice actor for Carlos went on to voice act Chris in Village, which is almost the exact same voice. It's really fascinating. It didn't make Chris in Village rise, unfortunately, in my opinion, because he's terrible in that game. But we've already finished Chris, so let's move on. Nemesis. I've always found Nemesis to be kind of annoying. And the replay of 3 Classic did not improve that opinion. I think that Mr. X is the definitive Stalker character. That's my hot take. In 2 Remake, to be specific. And I think that Nemesis had his thunder stolen and is annoying in 3 Remake, and on the revisit is more annoying in 3 Classic. He's alright in Marvel vs. Capcom, though. Sadler. This is going to be for Classic Sadler, not Remake Sadler, because I prefer Classic Sadler. I think Classic Sadler is the closest Capcom has gotten to replicating the villain mystique and persona of Wesker. He is so good in RE4 Classic and has some of the best voice delivery I think I've ever heard from a voice actor, especially in the 2000s. Iconic role. I think Remake Sadler is more like B tier. They basically went ham on the cult angle and kind of removed the campiness from him, which hurts him in the long run. But I think that he is just one of the best in Resident Evil 4 Classic. Luis. This will be remake version, because classic version is a little bit too a sexy boy trying to hit on every woman he sees. I think Luis is kind of like floating around between these two. I'm going to give him the A tier because I think they did a really good job contorting this character to be much more interesting in Remake for me. He kind of goes down early in the original game and doesn't get a chance to really develop beyond having the hots for Ashley, which is gross. I think that in Remake they found a really nice angle with him to be just kind of a little bit sleazy but charming, like a really good rogue archetype, and I think they nailed it. So he's gonna be in the A tier. Ashley in the remake is S++. I cannot believe how they took a character that I would put in C for her original incarnation and made her one of the best support characters in the entire franchise. She is so phenomenal in Remake. Wow. I love her new outfit. I love her new voice actress. I love her motivations. They toned down her hots for Leon to a point that it's a lot more sensible for what the situation. It's great. She's so good. Merchant is also S++ tier for both. I think the classic and the remake merchants stand side by side together in a delightful harmony of excellence. They're both really charismatic characters. They've got some of the most iconic lines in video games, and they're just both really good. They're both really, really good. I love them both. I do, in some ways, prefer Classic Merchant because he's just Classic Merchant. But I think the remake voice actor did an incredible job of living up to that hype. Mendez, we're going to go with the remake version because he's a little bit more fleshed out. I think that he gets that opportunity to be a little bit more sympathetic in some ways in the remake. And I like the boss fight. He does lose a tiny bit of his impact because originally his eye was a scanned item that you needed to get past a gate. And they removed that in the remake, and now the eye is just a treasure, and that's kind of morbid. But I think that Mendez is a menacing figure in the remake and a very solid first boss figure to deal with in that game. In the remake, I think that Salazar is really close to being A, but I think he's B. He was a pretty notable antagonist in RE4 Classic, and he's got some pretty memorable segments in that game, but I do think that he's just a better boss, and I love the super aristocrat angle that they went with him in the remake. So I do prefer his remake appearance and voice acting and boss fight. So I think B's pretty solid. Krauser gets to go in A. I think Krauser is so much better in the remake. There's actual connection between Leon and Krauser in this game that is only really hinted at in Darkside Chronicles and very faintly in game in classic RE4. They actually flesh that out in the game that he's in, so you actually understand why Leon has a strong opinion. Plus, he's the one who kills Luis in Remake, which gives Leon more motivation to deal with him. It's so much better than Sadler's giant plaga penis. I love the fact that I have to say some of these things because that's what it is. But I think Krauser's a great antagonist and is the strongest in Remake out of all of them. Because again, this is classic Sadler. Sheba's an A tier. I think Sheba is a wonderful character that is criminally in a racist game as a black woman. It's really bad. Really, really bad. She should have been the lead. And Chris probably shouldn't have been in it, to be completely frank. I don't think that Sheba was done kindly in RE5, but she's a great character that I want to see in a new game, or if they dare to remake 5, to try to give her another chance, because I think she deserves it. I really do. We're going to cut ahead a little bit because some of these are out of order. Okay, I think I have sorted this in a way that it now flows. I'm going to throw Moira and whoever this is and all of the... There. I'm moving the Revelations characters to tiers that I C or F because I don't know them, or I've only seen them in video format, or like Parker's the only one I've actually played as briefly, and he was fine. Okay, sorry for that delay. We're gonna get back into it with Sherry. Sherry in RE Classic, RE2 Classic to be specific, is fine. Inoffensive. Has some horrid shit happen to her. And then that affects RE6 Sherry, who is probably the highlight of that game, in my opinion. And then she is in Requiem as a support character. So Sherry's arc is, and then RE2 Remake, of course. If I incorporate all of that together, I think Sherry falls kind of into the B range because she was playable as a kid in 2 games, in one of the most terrifying segments ever in Remake, and a kind of forgettable moment in 2 Classic. She is the best part of RE6, a game that I can, as cherubly as possible, call a train wreck. Let's be real. And in Requiem, I think she has a really nice dynamic with Leon, but is sidelined, so she's not playable. So I think B is as good as I could put her, despite having an incredible moment in RE2 Remake and being the best thing about a dumpster pit. William Birkin is an A. Great villain, iconic design. I think that he's fantastic in both games. I prefer him a little bit more in Remake, but I do think that there's something about classic Birkin in the cutscenes that is a little bit absent in the Remake. So I think they're both kind of side by side. One of the greatest bosses, without a question, in the series. And it's definitely one of the most visually distinctive. Hunk! Hunk is an A. Hunk has been playable in a side game in 2 and 2 Remake, is in Mercenaries in 4, in Mercenaries 3D, and possibly 5. Is he in 5? I don't remember. I think he is in 5. And then is a boss fight in Requiem, which is amazing. What a great, if short, fight that was. I loved it. That was one of my favorite moments in Requiem, was all of a sudden Hunk shows up and you're like, holy shit, we're fighting Hunk. Hunk is a great kind of antagonary force. You don't really get to use him much as an antagonist because he's a playable character in most things, but he's really good. He's definitely the highlight of all the Umbrella soldiers. Tofu. I've never played any of the Tofu minigames that I can remember. I'll give Tofu a B slot, though, because I think that it's really funny. It's a great little hidden bonus to be able to play as this Tofu that can only attack with a knife. And then they made my fucking day when I found him in Requiem. I flipped the fuck out when I saw him in Requiem. All right, we only have one Code Veronica character included here, which is unfortunate because I think Alexia should be on here, but isn't. I could attempt to add her, I suppose. That was a bit more of an adventure than I realized because I remembered quite a few characters that this list just straight up didn't have. So we've added Marvin Brana and Brian Irons and Ned Birkin and Mr. X and Alexia Ashford and Ingrid Hunnigan. Josh. And even Derek Simmons. Don't know why all those characters weren't included, but they are now. So we'll continue with the Resident Evil 2 characters. And Marvin Brana, I think in Remake is fantastic. He's not in the game for very long, but but I think it really sets the stage for how messed up the whole situation is. And he really delivers some incredible voice work in Remake. It's phenomenal. Brian Irons, in terms of antagonists, he's not in the game for very long, but I think both Classic and Remake do a really good job of making you really hate this guy. But he's just a terrible human being running the police department, and probably one of the few characters you actually are rooting to die. And he dies in a spectacular fashion. Annette is a B. I think she's better in the Remake, but I still don't... I feel like she's is one of those characters that just shows up to accomplish something and then disappears again. And she's that way in both games. I wish that she was a little bit more present, I guess. Mr. X in the Remake is S++ tier for one of the best bosses and the absolute best stalker in the entire series. Super good. Super good. Love the Remake version. I've seen some of the most incredible gameplay where someone opens a door and he literally punches them in the face because he's just right there. It's so good. Okay, moving on to Code Veronica, finally. Steve. F. Terrible character. Really annoying, smarmy, and just doesn't deserve to live as long as he has, because he makes really bad decisions and gets Claire into more trouble than he's worth. And then becomes a big bad mutant boss at the end that you can't kill. Just not a good character. I really would like to see how they could reinvent him in the Remake. That is almost assuredly coming. I do like Alexia Ashford, though. I think that she is a fantastic villain. I did not look up Alfred. I did not see Alfred in my quick Code Veronica gallery search. But I think Alexia herself is a really good antagonist that I want to see in a remake as well. I think she would be so much in higher regard, honestly, if they can handle Code Veronica's themes better. Hunnigan is a great support character, but that's literally all she is. She's on your phone in 2 games, 4 and 6, and 4 remake, of course. Great in both, but just off to the side. Handled better in 4 remake, though. I will say that. She's not being hit on by Leon, thankfully. I don't even remember this guy's name. I'm not getting a hint either. So that kind of suggests how much of a jackass he is. Irving? There it is. It just came to me. Irving. Just the absolute antithesis of charisma. Just absolute slime ball of a character. Who is just terrible. No redeeming qualities whatsoever. Josh. Josh is who should have been co-starring with Sheva in Resident Evil 5. If they were going to do that game the way that they did it, it should have led with Josh and not Chris. That's my hot take of today. You'll hear it again in the second half of this video, I'm sure. Excelsia, I forget her name. She's just not necessary. She's just fluff in a game that already has a strong charismatic villain in Wesker, and just moves plot details along and is incompetent in certain areas, and it's just not fun to deal with. Jake is a C. He's with Sherry in 6, so by default they're the best campaign, so he gets a chance to be a bit better of a character and have a good dynamic with Sherry, so I like them. And that's really the nicest thing I'm going to say, because every other Resident Evil 6 character is going in the F tier. All of them. Helena's purpose is almost the same as Chris in Resident Evil 8. I'm not going to tell you what's going on until it's too late. She could have been something special. I mean, they even got Laura Bailey to voice her, and they gave her nothing. Piers is trying to restore Chris after PTSD, and is basically Chris Jr. And we didn't need another Chris. We already have one. Clara, I think is this character's name, is a copy of Ada. Why? No, don't do that. And then Derek Simmons, the attempt to do a new Wesker and missed the mark by such a wide margin, it's almost sad how much they missed. RE7, Ethan, hero of 7 in Village. Uncharismatic fuck. I am so sorry. I know what the purpose of Ethan was. It was to try to create a character with the ability to stand in as the player character, so they didn't give him a face. And in the process of not giving him a face, they didn't give him much of a personality either. He's basically wife guy who's mold. And that's basically Ethan in a nutshell. There's just not much there. I think he was better in 7. I think that 8 should have started a new character, perhaps. But I think that just forcing him to be in Village was a bad choice, because he just is a sack of potatoes. Mia, I would have put in B, because I think that she's the most interesting overall in 7, but then they put her in 8 and had her basically locked in a prison cell until the very end of the game. So she doesn't have a chance to be anything in 8, really. Beyond crying about Ethan. And I just think that her turn in 7 was much more interesting when she was possessed and trying to cut Ethan apart with a chainsaw. Jack, on the other hand, Jack is S tier. He is the next best stalker character in the series. Really intimidating, really frightening character. And his backstory cements that. He doesn't want to be doing what he's doing. He's been corrupted and lost by Evelyn and the whatever virus it is that she has. Tragic story. Zoe is also a C tier. She doesn't really get a chance to do anything. Like, she's there with you for a little bit, but when you rescue her and you get the most pointless choice of all time, are you going to choose the wife you just died for to rescue? Or are you going to pick this random woman that just talks to you on the phone a couple times? I don't know. I think that Zoe has potential to be an interesting character in the future if they bring her back. But as of right now, I think that she is a character that is desperate for something to do, because she basically has nothing to do in 7. I'm not putting her in F tier because I think that she has potential. I'm going to put Lucas in B tier and Marguerite, I think is her name, in A tier. Very creepy. She's great. Not quite S tier, but probably one of the most disturbing bosses in Resident Evil history. Lucas is, depending on how you look at the second half of Resident Evil 7, he's either a highlight or a low light. And for me, I think he's kind of in the middle, because he's just kind of like a seedy little nerd who's a sociopath, and his stick kind of gets old. Joe's great. He can join the A tier. He's probably the best DLC part. Note I haven't played 7. I've just seen 7 played through like 20 times by different people that I feel like I have a strong enough opinion on these characters. Evelyn, I gotta put her in C, because she's not as intimidating as I think Capcom intended for her to be. She's kind of funny. I think she's better in 7 in some ways. But then, like, everything they do to try to make her creepy kind of gets undermined by something. Like, her face is uncanny, or the voice actress, who's trying really hard, just doesn't quite land the lines right. So I feel like in the grand scheme of things that Evelyn's a bit of a miss. Moving on to Village, and we'll go ahead and start with Lady D. I'm going to put in B, perhaps controversially. I think she's a great character that got cut short. I think that she needed way more time to develop. I wish her and Heisenberg were in different positions. I really do. She's a really compelling character that is knocked out of the game very early, and was probably the biggest mistake they made in Village outside of recasting Ethan and giving Chris shit reasons to not tell him what's going on. Heisenberg is also a B. I think that he's a solid Magneto-like steampunky warlock guy. I think that his boss fight's one of the best in the game because it's just different and unique. But his personality's not my favorite. Donna, I think is her name, and her little doll, whose name I am forgetting. Annie, I think. They're A tier. I think this is my favorite character in Village. She doesn't say much, if anything. She just kind of talks through Annie. But I think she's really interesting, and her area is my favorite in the game. So I feel like I can put her in A tier, even though she's not that involved with anything plot-wise. I just think she's cool. Moreau, unfortunately, is F because why did we handle this character this way? I think it's kind of offensive. Not a good look. Probably the biggest mistake Capcom's made with a character choice in the recent games. Also, just kind of a sad character, mostly. Not a big fan. Mother Miranda is another character that I'm just not that excited about. I don't think she's F tier, but I'm going to put her in C. I think that she just kind of mucked up the whole Resident Evil chronology because apparently she's the one who influenced Spencer. Another character that's oddly absent now that I think about it. But I think I'll make the Mad Duke Spencer just so I don't have to look up something else. I don't find her motivation all that compelling, and like the entire thing about separating Rose into these different canisters is just almost too supernatural for Resident Evil. It's weird. So not a fan. I like Rose. I think she got a little bit of a chance to shine in her DLC package once she actually got into it, but the whole motivation of that thing is silly. Like, I'm going to trust this random researcher that I got a text from and betray Chris's instructions and touch the myseat thing and go on a trip through memory lane through weird environments and see a lot of copies of myself in the attempt to try to make me. It's very abstract. Again, it's too supernatural for me. But I do like where Rose's powers end up, and I think she could be interesting in a future game, but I don't think she was done super well in the game she appears in. The Duke, like the personality, but I really feel like this guy is a gigantic obesity joke, and I'm not a fan of that. So I feel like I have to put him in F because I don't think that was a good decision. Village had some bad decisions. Instead of using the bad Duke from Rose's campaign, Spencer. Spencer's appeared in like 5 and 8 in backstory, in 9 Requiem. I'm not sure if I'm fully on board with the direction they're taking him, but I think that he's been an interesting behind-the-scenes villain. And now we're getting into Requiem. Grace is my probably last S++ character. I love Grace. She is my delightful neurodivergent gal that I really relate to. I love Grace. She just makes me happy with her being in a game. I feel very aligned with her. And I think that she's very believable as every person wandering into a really horrible, scary situation. Alyssa is like cut down so fast and follows the Chris Redfield book of not telling you jack shit. That would have made things so much more compelling and knowledgeable for Grace for the future if she just said what the fuck was going on. However, she does have some legacy as an Outbreak character, so I'm not going to put her in F tier for bad decision making, but she doesn't have a whole lot of time in Requiem to really shine. Emily's a B. I think that she is a really interesting character, but it also saddles Grace with a young girl, which is an unfortunate trend in the games. Claire had that happen with Sherry. Again, it's one of those situations where it's like, this feels kind of tropey. Zeno really wants to be as cool as Wesker, but is not as cool as Wesker. But I think that he is charismatic enough as a not Wesker to be in the B tier. However, I gotta give it up to Mr. Victor Gideon for being a really surprisingly good villain. On watching people play the game after I beat it twice and just really picking up on the subtleties of the voice performance and the mocap. Really great job. He kind of pops out of the game for a bit too long though, I think. Because he's just kind of not there for most of the arc section, which is a decent sized chunk of the game to cut him out of. So I feel that hurts him a little bit, but in the grand scheme of things, a fantastic villain and one of the best to come post Wesker. That's my character ranking. I'm pretty happy with most of these characters. Pretty much A++ through B, I think, are pretty solid. C are kind of forgettable or have a big character flaw that I don't like. And F, down here, that got scrolled off, I despise for various reasons. So let's move into the game ranking itself. Resident Evil franchise ranking. Let's do it. I feel like I am in the best place in my entire life to actually do this, since I have recently played through Resident Evil Director's Cut, and then gave classic RE2 and RE3 another go. And I think that those were the games I haven't played the longest. And most of the rest of these I have some relative recency with, except for Code Veronica. I haven't played that since the Dreamcast. But I still feel like I've got an adequate enough memory of it. Most everything else has been in like the last 15 years. So I feel like I at least have a good basis for the rankings of these games, with Code Veronica really being the outlier and being the one I haven't played in the last 15 years or so. We'll start at the bottom and work up. I already sorted these, obviously. And this includes Requiem, which I discussed in a separate video. So let's dive in with the bottom. Resident Evil Giraffe Blowjob. Or 6. If you haven't been internet poisoned. I am a very strong critic of Resident Evil 6. I think that this game is a disaster on about every single conceivable level. It's just a mess. It feels really clunky because they decided to add a whole bunch of new mechanics and not teach you a damn thing about any of them. The story is probably the worst in the series. It has 4 different chapters to play through with different characters, and all of them are uninteresting, dull, and in some cases offensive. I think that Chris's campaign is among the absolute dredges of video gamedom. I hated that campaign from start to finish. It also doesn't help that this was one of the last games I played with my ex. So that's another factor on top of all of my other complaints. I think that Derek Simmons is a terrible villain. I don't know why we need to have a fake Ada. I didn't even finish Ada's campaign because the co-op for it is a mess. It's a disaster. It's trash. So it's just a miserable experience. I know some people who love this game. I'm very happy for them. I cannot be in the same boat. I'm glad they can find joy in something that I do not find any in. And that is the beauty of different opinions. But for me, Resident Evil 6 is one of the worst video games ever made. Full stop. Next up is Resident Evil 3 Remake, which manages to almost do many of the same things wrong as Resident Evil 3 Classic did. It's kind of remarkable, but it does it differently and worse. Resident Evil 2 Remake, as you can see, is really high up on the list. And it stole the thing that made Resident Evil 3 memorable, which is making Mr. X be like the definitive nemesis in all of the new games. So Nemesis here just really comes off as an annoyance and doesn't just do what Nemesis did in classic RE3. Shows up, chases you around for a little bit, and is typically like cutscene fodder, boss battle, hardly ever chases Jill in the sense of what the original game presented. So despite this being my favorite Jill in the entire franchise, I love her design and her voice and her just general fuck it all personality in RE3 Remake. I think Carlos is really good in it too. It's a disappointment on a lot of levels because it just feels like a bloated DLC campaign to RE2 Remake, which my understanding is it was, and they turned it into a full game, and they probably shouldn't have. It also really makes the, are they Chimera in this game? No, brain suckers. They do a terrible thing and force a brain sucker, or whatever they call them, onto Jill in a unskippable cutscene that forces her to be orally molested by this creature that did not exist in the original game and didn't need to exist in the new game. There's a note and very clear visual cues that if you get attacked, do this. But nope, they had to make it a cutscene and make it gross and objectifying. And probably the worst moment for a woman in any of the new games, in my opinion. Absolutely deplorable. So, because of those factors, I feel like RE3 Remake is next to the bottom. Resident Evil Revelations. I played this on the 3DS, its intended system. I found it kind of boring. I didn't find it all that interesting. And they tried to add like a Metroid Prime scan mechanic into it that I just don't think works for Resident Evil, personally. The new characters that aren't Jill and Chris really didn't do a whole lot for me. The zombie types are just blah. I did not get into this game. Some people really like it, but it was not one that I particularly enjoyed for a few different reasons. Resident Evil The Mercenaries 3D should have not been on the 3DS. It should have been something that they released for like 20-30 bucks as a downloadable side game that includes the Resident Evil 4 and 5 maps and characters and was more fleshed out than it is. And probably should have been a multiplayer experience online without having to do Street Pass and all that fun stuff with the 3DS. It's perfectly functional and it is a decent enough time, but I don't think it is the way that Mercenaries should have been separated out into its own game. It really just feels compromised being on the 3DS. Resident Evil 8, aka Village. Kind of low on the list. I'm just not a big fan of Ethan and everything that is his story arc, really. I think Rose is fine as a teenager. But I think that Village is basically it's kind of like a Temu Resident Evil 4 to me. It's basically a less dynamic and interesting protagonist in a isolated European village, exploring and running into various boss creatures that want to kill him. And the gimmick is that, this all could have been avoided if Chris just said a couple words to Ethan at the beginning about why they murdered his not wife in front of him and took their baby. Probably one of the dumbest moments in the entire series. I continue to find reasons to despise Chris Redfield as the series moves on. 6 didn't do any favors. 5 didn't do a lot of favors either, but Village is basically like the nadir of Chris Redfield for me. I am so over that character. Gameplay wise, I think it's fine, and I think that the Benevito, yeah, that's it. That section is up there with some of the best Resident Evil horrors I've ever experienced. But that's really the strength of it. I just got frustrated at Ethan. I got frustrated at the plot. I got frustrated at Chris. It's just kind of a mess on a narrative front and on a character development front. And for me, that's really important. Resident Evil 4 PlayStation 2. The lowest of the Resident Evil 4s because it is the least essential. It is a compromised port of the GameCube version that was made against Shinji Mikami's will, which ultimately led to him leaving Capcom to go to Clover, and then when Clover shut down, he just left Capcom entirely, and is really only worthwhile for the Separate Ways campaign, which has been added to all subsequent re-releases of the game with better cutscene optimization and just is a generally better experience anywhere else. The PlayStation 2 is muddy. It's not pleasant to look at. There's sound compromises, I think, as well, and it doesn't play as good. So I think if you have to play a Resident Evil 4 on a PS2, it's the worst way to do it. It's still a great game. It's just the most compromised and least technically sophisticated one out of them all. Resident Evil 3 Nemesis Classic. I still didn't fully enjoy this game on the revisit. I think Nemesis is annoying, actually, being the chase heavy creature that he is in the original PS1 game. He just kind of gets in the way and does a lot of damage and is obnoxious and not really fun to deal with and kind of gets old after a while. I think that Resident Evil 2 Remake and Resident Evil Requiem do the concept of the stalker so much better. For the time, I could see it being a good game, but I have to admit that by the time I was getting near the end of it, I was pretty much ready for it to be done, and that's not a great feeling when you're playing a game, that you're just like, I really want to be moving on. But that's basically what Resident Evil 3 Nemesis did for me. Also, that worm boss sucks. It is very unclear what you need to do to actually get past that boss. I used Rewind a lot to beat that boss, so I wasn't annoyed as much as I actually was. Resident Evil 5, an actually very good game that has a lot of baggage on it. One, it's very racist, incredibly racist, offensively racist. I could even go that far. Setting the game in Africa with Chris as the protagonist, basically white saviorism, very bad look. Even if you tried to disguise it by having a whole bunch of different ethnicities in your Africa, it's still a white man going to Africa and shooting people. It's not a good look. Ever. The gameplay is more actiony, and I'm not the biggest fan of how they decided to do that with the inventory, because you're in a co-op situation 24/7. Sheba's always there with you. I think Sheba's a great character. I want her in a game that isn't racist, so she can actually shine quite a bit more. It's probably my favorite Wesker in the series. Even though the voice actor, who I will not name, apparently is a piece of shit. I forget exactly why now. Apparently, big shithead, so kind of sucks. I like the fact that they recasted him pretty quick after those allegations came out. Mercenaries mode is probably at its most fun in Resident Evil 5. I'll give it that. Couldn't we have just done like Josh and Sheba? That would have been a bit better. Still would have been racist with all of the, in quotes, tribal zombies that you have to deal with. Really shitty. Just really fucking shitty, Capcom. I'm so glad you moved past that. And I hope that if you do remake 5, you really, really rethink how you approach that game, because it is a trash-fired dumpster pit of bad decisions in terms of conception on narrative and setting. Resident Evil Code Veronica, another game with some baggage, because it handles a potentially trans character really badly. Really badly. Offensively. It was the early 2000s, so it is a really terrible gay stereotype. And Alfred Ashford is done real dirty in this game. Outside of that, Steve Burnside might be the most annoying and character assassination-y character Resident Evil's had, in how Claire seems to just fall head over heels for the Leonardo DiCaprio lookalike. It was really bad how she's such a badass at the beginning and just kind of loses that as the game progresses. Really disappointing. I think that for a Dreamcast game, it's certainly a step up visually. It's got some really cool gameplay ideas. I think this is the best Chris has ever been, in my opinion. Even better than RE Remake. But I think that Code Veronica is probably the most deserving of a remake, to correct many little flaws in it. And I'm hoping that that happens, because Claire deserves another game, god damn it. A classic Resident Evil Director's Cut version. I just played this for the first time this year, and I think it's still a really good game. I played it as Jill and had a really good time. It was pretty phenomenal. Very important game in the 32-bit days, for sure. really defined what this series was going to be about for a while. It's not flawless. I think RE Remake does a great job of remedying some of the issues and adds a lot to it to flesh it out even more. But for a first attempt to quote-unquote enhance a game in this series, and being the first game at all, it's a really good one. I can see why Capcom went ham on Resident Evil after playing it. Resident Evil 4 again, but this is the GameCube original, which is a really fantastic genre-defining game that is a masterwork of the 2000s. One of the most important video games ever made in 3D, without question. Redefined what action games were going to be moving forward for pretty much the rest of time. Really great game, too. It still holds up extremely well. It's got some latent misogyny throughout. Poor Ashley is in a skirt, and they really remind you of that quite often in this game. Ada is also pretty hypersexualized, which is kind of common in most of the games. Even the remakes suffer from this to some degree. But it's a little bit more pronounced here, and Krauser loves throwing that B word at her. So I feel that RE4 Classic is a great game that is kind of held up by the mentality of its time frame. However, the best way to play it is still the Wii version, in my opinion. Even better than the modern version you can get on like the PS5 and Switch and all those things. I think the Wii version plays the best with the motion controls. It is the best feeling motion controls on a system that I despise for motion controls. That says a lot about how good those controls are, because I complain so much about the Wii's motion controls, but this is the one of the few games that got it right. It feels amazing to play RE4 on the Wii. So if you want to play RE4 Classic, that's my recommendation. If you have a Wii, track this down. It's worthwhile. We're in the top 5 now. And I think RE Remake is a extraordinary game that I really discounted back when it came out. I had played RE2, 3, and Code Veronica, I think, by the time I played RE Remake. And I think I was getting a little tired of the formula, because I had played 2 on the N64, which came out like 2000. And then Code Veronica was also 2000. And then 3, I think, came out like 2001. Like also? No, Code Veronica was 99, early 2000. Resident Evil 3 was late 2000. And then Resident Evil on the GameCube was 2002. Something like that. I don't remember the exact dates. But when it came out, I was feeling the fatigue a little bit. But when I bought it on the Switch and came back to it all these years later and was absolutely floored at how good this game still looks, easily one of the best looking GameCube games, and honestly one of the best looking Switch games. It's a really strong remake enhancement. The biggest issue I have with it is that they bustified Jill for some reason in the modern versions when she was not as endowed on the GameCube. So that's kind of disappointing that they just felt that they needed to change Jill's proportions for some inexplicable reason. But otherwise, I think that RE Remake is phenomenal. Excellent game start to finish. Really executes on what the original game brought to the table and amps it up. The Crimson Heads are a great addition. Lisa Trevor's a wonderful addition. It's just a really phenomenal game that I wish I had appreciated more back when I was younger and picked it up back in 2002-ish and didn't gel with. I was wrong. I was very wrong. Resident Evil 2 Remake would have probably been higher on this list if I hadn't replayed Resident Evil 2 Classic. RE2 Remake is a superb remake. I love Leon and Claire. I love how they are represented in this game. I think it's their best overall depiction of this time frame. I love their voice actors. That's just partially a reason why I want Claire to come back in something, because I want to hear Claire's voice actress again in a new thing. I think that they really nailed the vibe of RE2 in a lot of ways, not every way, but in a lot of ways. Mr. X is fantastic in this game, truly terrifying. I think G's also brought to life in a way that just really makes him a menace in the best ways. Sherry's side mission is the creepiest goddamn thing I've ever played in the video game. It's too real. It's actually disturbing. I think that the combat and the boss fights are really good. The tension is really high. It's a superb game. It just misses a few things that makes RE2 classic so memorable. Like, there's no spiders. Not a single spider to be found. There's a couple other sequences that have been lost along the way. I feel like the sewers are very different in a way that it does hurt RE2 Remake a tiny bit in terms of the scope of what the game's trying to tell. There's no plant creatures. There's just now plant zombies. Just things like that. The game is still excellently crafted and is, my opinion, the best story version of RE2. But I think that there's just a couple things about RE2 Classic that are done just a tiny bit better. And now for the newest game in the series, Resident Evil Requiem, which I think manages to top RE2 Remake a little bit. Grace is fantastic. Grace is wonderful. She is, to me, at the very least, she reads neurodivergent in like a way that I relate to as someone who's neurodivergent. I think Grace brings something really powerful to the table by having a character that is a believable human being, i.e. not Leon S. Kennedy, who can suplex zombies and kick them across the room. Grace is so well executed. The way she runs when she's absolutely terrified shitless. The way that she whimpers constantly as she's moving around these scary ass environments. She gets so much growth in this game that by the time you play her in her last segment, she's much more confident in herself and her capabilities. She's still scared, but she's just like, she's got a motivating reason to be moving forward, and it's really well handled. Leon, on the other hand, is a great counterbalance during Grace's sections. So he'll come in after a really tense segment with Grace and just give you the opportunity to just kind of let loose some steam with him being Leon. It feels really good just going back and forth between the two of them. And then when you're actually in full-on Leon mode for most of the second half of the game, it's really gratifying. And he's super fun to play. He might be the best feeling Resident Evil character in terms of versatility and depth that they've ever had. That plays well. I'm looking at you, RE6, once again. I think that it's also got a lot of well-done fan service that really hit me, especially in RPD, in the right places. It can be considered overdone, but I do think that generally speaking, it is well executed and well handled. It's also got really good music. It's probably some of my favorite music of the series is in RE Requiem. The voice acting in this game is also phenomenal. Really excellent work. So yeah, I think that RE Requiem is a fantastic game that is in the top 3 of this franchise for me at this present moment. Really the biggest nitpick I have is that it's probably a little too easy with its boss fights. And It's still got some silly plot stuff, but at least I think it's more coherent than 7 and 8 were, in my opinion. And it brings Chris back. At least he's not there in person, but god damn it. Can we have the other Redfield, please? Resident Evil 2 Classic. Speaking of the other Redfield, Claire, in Leon's debut, still a superb, another genre-defining game, honestly. This game set the franchise into overdrive, and basically gave us one of the best games of the 32-bit era, without a doubt. It is a great game to play. It feels good to play this game, even with the limitations of having pre-rendered backgrounds and tank controls and sometimes occasional cheap shots. It still feels amazing to play this game, and it's just got great flow from beginning to end. It flows really well. And then the zapping system, such an important thing that the remake dropped pretty much entirely. You play through one mode with one character, and then you get a alternate version that's happening at the same time with the other character, and what you do in one affects the other. It's a really great system, and they bring in Mr. X in the second half. It's really, really great, and it's a shame that they couldn't get it into RE2 Remake. It would have made that game feel a little less like it sanded off some things that it shouldn't have. It's also got some of the greatest enemies and boss designs in any video game, which RE2 Remake manages to recapture a lot of them. But Lickers and G and Mr. X, some really iconic zombie designs too. Just a phenomenal game, top to bottom. I really enjoyed playing through the full game on the opposite of what I did last time, which was Leon first, then Claire. That changes the whole story, like, quite significantly. And at the very tip top, which should be a surprise given that I gush about RE4 Remake a lot on this channel. There's a Let's Play of most of it on this channel. I think RE4 Remake is easily the best Resident Evil game ever. It takes everything that was good about RE4 and amps it up and removes all the misogyny. All of it. None's left. Not a single bit. Ada's still a little bit hyper sexy, but it's not like pandery in the same way that RE4 original was. Ashley's completely a different character and a so much improved character as well. Leon is great. Ada's great. Luis is great. Ashley's great. All the villains are great except for Sadler, the one character that RE4 Classic nailed on the first try, and they tried to do something a little different with him with Remake, and while it's good and it's still well done, it's not the same level of performance. Sadler in RE4 Classic is an icon, in my opinion. But everything else character-wise is fantastic. The boss fights are still all great. Nothing was really cut in this game in contrast to like RE2 and RE3. A lot of the things that were not in Leon's campaign eventually made it into Ada's in the DLC. All the weapons are here. Mercenaries mode is super fun. It's personally my favorite outside of 5, and 5 is primarily because I have a lot of good memories even with it being with my ex. I do think RE4 Remake's Mercenaries is overall better though, in the concept of it adds some new mechanics to it to give it a little bit more spice, and it still feels really fun to play, and it's not quite as punishing in a way. But yeah, RE4 Remake does everything right as far as I'm concerned. It's also got, like, for me, just it's a beautiful looking, sounding, playing, controlling experience. that it's a top 5 game of all time for me personally. All right, that is the end of this Resident Evil ranking episode. I hope that you enjoyed my thoughts on this franchise, one that I truly and dearly love. Quite a bit, as I've just discovered with replaying 3 games and playing a new one first couple months of the year. I just really do adore Resident Evil. We'll probably be tackling Zelda next, because it's also got a big anniversary that just passed during the hiatus. So we will be doing some Zelda stuff next time. So I will see you when I see you. Take care, friends.